To welcome you to the Now New York City Mayoral Forum. Your host this evening, are Pace University, the Women's and Gender Studies Department at Pace, and preeminently the New York City chapter of the National Organization for Women. In tonight's forum, the major Republican, Democratic, and Independent candidates for mayor are going to address issues of critical importance to the future of this city. And they're going to do that with a special emphasis on issues affecting women and girls. PACE is a center for discussion and debate in Lower Manhattan on the most critical public policy issues of our time, and equality and civic engagement are two of our core university values. So we are delighted to sponsor this event tonight. We look forward to a spirited discussion of these issues. We look forward to hearing what these candidates will do as mayor if elected. And this debate is surely the democratic process in action. It's my very great pleasure to introduce Sonia Osorio, President of the National Organization for Women's New York chapter. She is a champion for New York City women and their families. She's a leading figure in the fight against workplace discrimination and sexual assault and human trafficking. Please join me in welcoming Sonia Osorio.
Thank you so much, Mr. Friedman. I'm Sonia Osorio with the National Organization for Women. I'm so excited to see all of you here tonight. This is going to be a great next 2 hours. I'd like to start by thanking Mr. Stephen Friedman, who's president of Pace University, for his tremendous support and participation in giving us this opportunity here tonight. I'd like to thank Nancy Reagan, chair of the Women's and Gender Studies Department here, and the many Pace staff and now staff and volunteers whom without their hard work tonight we would not be here and this would not be possible. And finally, I'd like to thank our amazing co-sponsors tonight. These organizations are the backbone of the work being done in New York City to improve the lives of women and girls in New York City, and we're so honored to be able to be here tonight with them. It's AAUW and its virtual branch, Equality Now, Hollaback, League of Women Voters, New York Women's Foundation, the Ms. Foundation, National Association of Female Executives, National Council of Jewish Women, the New York Women's Agenda, United Neighborhood Houses, the Women's Bar Association of New York, the Equal Pay Coalition, Women's City Club, the YWCA of Brooklyn, New York City, and Queens. They're all here in the house with us tonight. So I want to quickly go over the rules for tonight. We have with us, we're starting with the Republicans and independent candidates up first, followed by the Democrats. Each discussion is going to be about 45 minutes, and we'll have a brief intermission between. We've got 3 podiums here, but we have 2 candidates for the first debate for the Republicans, and that is Joe Lhota and Adolfo Carrion. We don't have John Katzimatidis. He's not coming. I'm not exactly sure why, but we're all here. We made the effort to come out. We took the train here. We fought the traffic. And we are here, but he has not. Now, I know that Sunday nights are a very, very exciting TV night. Maybe he wanted to make sure to catch Game of Thrones before, he gets behind. But he's not here, and I hope that each and every one of you remember that on election night, because 700 of us are here to talk about what's important to the women of New York City and advancing our economy and learning what the next mayor of New York City is going to do for us, but he's not here with us. So in the interest of time, we have no opening or closing remarks. Candidates will have 60 seconds to respond and 30 seconds for rebuttals when appropriate. And our hashtag for tonight is #NowVotes. So please tweet away. And now I'm very, very pleased to introduce our moderator, political analyst and former New York Times city columnist and author of Mike Bloomberg, Money, Power, and Politics, the esteemed journalist, someone you all know very well and have read over the years, Joyce Pernick.
Thank you. I think, yes, why don't you, Mr. Carrion and Mr. Loda. When we had a candidate not show up in the past, we used to talk about the empty chair debate. We'll have the empty podium debate. Can you hear me? You'll hear me? Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I thank you all for attending and the candidates who are here for participating. Let's get right to it. Just one opening note from me. It has been said so often that it is now received wisdom that all issues are feminist issues. I take that concept to heart and will be asking questions that deal with issues that are typically considered of more interest to women than to men, and I will be asking some questions that don't fall into that category, that are of interest to everyone. We will also hear some questions from Sonia Osorio, whom you just met, the president of the New York City chapter of the National Organization for Women. So, here we go. The first question that I'd like to ask has to do with mayoral power. Mayors of New York are all powerful. They derive their power from their job description in the city charter and from tradition and practice. Basically, if they make an accommodation with the Speaker of the City Council, and I have never seen a mayor who has not, they can do almost whatever they want. There's a check in Albany, of course, but there's really no advise and consent to speak of. There's no local judiciary that reviews anything of moment. So from each of your individual perspectives, and with full knowledge that each of you would like to be the city's next all-powerful mayor, would you change the mayor's role in any way? I'll start with Mr. Carrion.
Joyce, thank you, and I first want to thank NOW, and thank you for the important work that you are doing to advance this set of issues that you champion, to President Friedman, to Sonia Osorio for her work, Joyce, for the work you're doing now, and the Women and Gender Studies Department. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I've been a chief executive as borough president of the Bronx. I think everybody knows that that is far less power than a mayor. I do believe that the state constitution does limit some of the powers of the mayor, but I do believe in a strong executive. I was a member of the city council where we challenged the mayor, and in the case of my term there, both Joe and I worked on opposite sides of the building. Rudy Giuliani exercised a significant amount of power. You may disagree with him on some of his policies and approaches, but he was a strong mayor, and I think the strong mayor model with a strong city council that challenges the mayor is actually a good management model for American cities.
So you would keep it the way it is. Mr.
Certainly.
Loda?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you to the National Organization for Women as well as Pace University for having this debate tonight. I, too, agree that the power of the mayor is one, as lined out in the City Charter of 1989, is almost omnipotent, and I'm not sure I would change much in that. I would make the accommodation to work with City Council. I would find the roles there, but I think what was envisioned by the folks who wrote the charter and rewrote the charter in New York, believe it or not, the mayor in New York City is not the most powerful mayor in New York, in the country. If you looked at the city of Houston, where not only is the mayor in charge of the executive branch, the mayor is also When I served down there, Kathy Whitmire was the mayor, and she was also the chair of city council and controlled all the legislation that went on.
Would you like
That
to
would be
change
a
it
bit
to
much.
do that here?
I'm sorry?
Get
No,
away
I
with
don't
this?
think that should happen here. I think having a separate and independent legislative branch is a good thing. But at the same point, I do believe that the City of New York is a complex organization. The City of New York is a $70 billion corporation. It's got over 300,000 employees, and it requires a CEO.
All right, Mr. Loto, this question is for you. Why are you a Republican? No, it's a
It's a serious
no,
question.
no.
folks.
Let me explain.
That's not the question?
No, your positions on issues are progressive, but the National Republican Party, and in some instances, the State Republican Party, embrace positions on gun violence, immigration, same-sex marriage, and on women that are not only alien to most New Yorkers, but to you. It's no secret that many of those positions hurt Mitt Romney, maybe fatally, in the last presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you call yourself a Republican?
Well, I'm a Republican and have been since I was probably 10 years old, and I'll tell you why. There was a story. When I grew up in the Bronx, my father and my grandfather, who were both very active in unions, was very upset with me when I said, you know what,
Can I interrupt you? Can you
Sure, can I
somehow
talk
move
closer?
I'm having trouble over here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So somebody else might. I don't know.
I actually thought that the person in 1964, when I was 10 years old, should be elected was Barry Goldwater. My grandfather proceeded to take me down to Atlantic City to the Democratic Convention and actually use it as a form of exorcism. It didn't work. I actually do believe in limited government. I do believe that the government, from a libertarian point of view, I've always espoused this point of view, that I absolutely believe that the government shouldn't be in the bedroom. It shouldn't be telling us what to do. It should be limited in its focus. It should direct us and control society in a way such that it's not overbearing. So, look, I do disagree, vehemently disagree with the National Republican Party. I'm doing everything I can to change it, but I do believe there is a role for people who are more moderate or more progressive when it comes to social issues. I do believe in the Big Ten approach. I do believe the Democratic Party is not fiscally disciplined enough, and I really focus around fiscal discipline. Sorry.
Mr. Carrion, do you want to respond to that, or do you want to tell us why, as a lifelong Democrat, you went for the Republican nomination and now you're with the Independence Party?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and in fact, I am an independent. I left the Democratic Party after about 18 years, and I entered a conversation with the Republican Party about a fusion candidacy based on their invitation and interest, because they found that they had a winning formula with the last time they put that fusion together with Mike Bloomberg. I am running as an independent. I appreciate any party that is interested in talking about independent leadership that advances innovation, that is not loyal to party dogma, but to new ideas and new solutions to deal with the problems that we are facing in this society. We are clearly in a state of gridlock with these two parties. We're not reforming our education system. The tax burden in the city is too high for businesses. On the national level, we're not dealing with the important issues that we need to deal with to create a more open and just society, and a society rich with opportunity. And so I am running as an independent because I believe that New Yorkers are there already. The voters are way ahead of the politicians on most issues.
Mr. Loto, a quick follow-up to my last question. You say you're pro-choice, but your Republican colleagues in the state Senate argue that the Reproductive Health Act is too extreme. In fact, it would bring state law into alignment with federal law so that women would be guaranteed access to abortion if either their life or health is in danger. Do you support the proposed bill? And if you were mayor today, what would you do to work with the Senate Republicans to get them to approve it?
I do support the efforts of Governor Cuomo, who outlined in his State of the State address the equality and the equality programs that he has for women. He's yet to put that bill in place. So I don't know what exactly the Republican Senate is railing against, since there is no bill in place. But as outlined by Governor Cuomo, I agree that the laws of the state of New York should be in compliance with and consistent with the laws of the United States of America. I don't have an issue with that. I think there's a lot of hyperbole going on about what is going to be in that bill. But the bill doesn't exist yet, but everything that has been talked about rhetorically, I totally agree with. I will work with the Senate. They will know my points of view, and I will we'll go to Albany, as all mayors do, and lobby for my opinion and my approach.
Let me move on to daycare. In the 2014 budget, 47,000 daycare and after-school slots were on the chopping block, according to the Campaign for Children. Will either of you commit to keeping those programs at least at this year's level so they're not perennial caught up in the budget cycle?
You know, from my
Mr. Carrion and then Mr. Loda.
Yeah, from my experience with budgeting and as a city council member and then advocating on behalf of one of the boroughs that is probably still the poorest borough in this city. This kabuki dance that happens every year, where the executive presents a budget with severe cuts to daycare and libraries and senior programs and food programs for the hungry and job training programs, et cetera, with the understanding that the city council is going to come back and do their part of the dance, I think is damaging to the delivery of city services, to the nonprofit organizations that struggle so much to balance their budgets and deliver city services. It is why I believe only 3 in 10 voters are coming out to vote in the last election. So we need to fix this.
In other words, you don't really believe that they were ever realistically being cut because you think it's part of the kabuki dance.
I think it's part of a dance, and I think the mayor needs to be honest, and I would certainly protect those programs.
Do you agree, Mr. Loda?
I do agree, and I think I may be the one who coined it the kabuki when I was the budget director, because it really was, in fact, you know, we'll cut here, you'll put back there. It was all orchestrated. Peter Vallone can tell you how orchestrated it was. But here's the difference in where in my administration, what I would do with daycare and what I would do with child care. We need to get children as early as possible and begin the education process. Right now, it cannot just be a point of view where it's almost like daycare from looking at kids and not having a core curriculum. When you look at the rest of the world and you look at the disadvantage that we have in the United States, and we don't start educating our kids until they get to kindergarten, it's too late when you look at what's going on in Europe and when you look at what's going on in Asia. We need to create a core curriculum.
Talking about the Head Start level.
Well, it's not to be just daycare. It should be education care. It should be actually having a curriculum so that you can start teaching 3-year-olds. You're not going to be able to have really substantive math and reading, but it can start then because the rest of the world doesn't.
How do we pay for it?
How will you pay for it? The budget right now that was cut by the mayor was about $400 million. $400 million represents less than 1% of the entire budget. Joyce, when you were at the New York Times covering the budgets, when I was there, I used to get 4 and 5% savings every year. I can't wait to get back there. There's no way that you can say that we have to raise taxes.
Let me raise an issue where we may be able to save a lot of money. A colleague said to me the other day that these debates never get specific enough. He said it quite negatively towards me, that I should make it specific. So I'm going to try. I'm going to delve, or get you to delve, into a very unsexy but very important issue. The city's annual pension contribution in the budget is $8 billion, equal to the combined total for police, fire, and sanitation. Despite recent reforms in Albany, Comptroller Liu recommended changes that would make the city pension system more efficient. The comptroller says he could save $1 billion a year. Mayor Bloomberg has supported it, so did Scott Stringer, who's running for comptroller. But union leaders opposed it, and the plan has gone nowhere. Do you support that plan? I'll start with you, Mr. Loda. And if you don't, do you have other ways to save on pension costs? And please be specific.
Sure. The plan that John Liu put forward and Mike Bloomberg agreed with was one in which the 5 pension systems in the city of New York would be merged together. They wouldn't be 5 separate general counsels. There wouldn't be 5 separate controllers. It would all be put together into one system. And you know why the unions didn't agree to it? The unions weren't brought to the table. You need to work with the unions. John Liu, when I saw that press conference that night on New York 1, I couldn't believe that they were able to get the unions to agree. And it was only the next day that the unions were all railing against it. What you need to do as mayor of New York, what you absolutely need to do as controller of New York, is you've got to work with the unions. You've got to find a way in which you can find common ground.
Everybody always says you got to work with the unions. The question is, Lou has a plan.
I agree with the plan.
That would consolidate the 5 into 1. Would you support that?
I agree. I agree with the plan.
That's 5 managers into 1.
Right. I agree with the approach of having a common. I understand. I agree with the proposal that was put out by Controller Liu. What else do we need to do? We need to get better returns on the investments in our portfolio. John talks about the great investments, but quite honestly, had they not had active management and they just put the money into a fidelity fund, they would have gotten a significant better rate of return. Active management of our pension system is not working.
Time.
Second.
Mr. Carrion.
I just want to congratulate the most severe timekeeper that I have ever seen.
By the way, where is she?
She's sitting right there in the white jacket. We'll talk to you later.
You
raise your hand? Can you raise your hand? I want to see.
I hope that's not charged against my
Before,
time now.
Mr. Carrion, I just want to make sure, so you do, I just want to be clear, because I'm having a terrible time hearing you
Yeah,
over
it's
here.
difficult here.
Forgive me, I don't know if you are, but the sound is not carrying. So you're saying you would support,
I support
in
John
effect,
Yes.
the controller's plan, and you'd get along with the unions?
Right. I do support the
Okay.
plans. I will work with the unions. We need to change the investments. And most
So
importantly,
you'd
we need to
consolidate-
change the pensions for new employees going forward so that over time we can start reducing
You'd
it.
consolidate the 5
She's gonna
pension
yell at me
plans
again.
into 1, is what you're saying, and have 1 manager?
Yes.
Okay.
The controller.
I'm sorry, Mr. Carrion. Somehow your microphone is working, but for me and his isn't. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced that consolidation is the cure-all. I think there are a number of other things that we need to do, but you cannot begin to talk about the burden of pensions and the relationship of the workforce and their participation in the discussion and the direction that we're going without folding in the health benefits that are an even bigger burden that is dragging us down. We are one of the few places in the country where the workforce, almost 96% of our municipal workforce makes no contributions into their health benefits package. So we need to go back and re-engineer our working relationship with the unions. They're going to have to contribute. It's a gaping hole. They've already positioned themselves to begin the discussion by talking about back pay, and I think it's going to push an even deeper hole.
So you're not sure that consolidation is the answer?
I'm not entirely convinced it is, yeah.
So what is? I'm not sure I understand what is.
Well, look, I think
you got to, if you broaden the scope, then you could very easily wind up with nothing.
Well, we've had a system that at times has worked well, and has given the employee representatives of the different unions representation on a decision-making board. They are stakeholders in this relationship. So I think we need to protect the integrity of that relationship and re-engineer the rules of the game. And also, we're going to need to push back on their participation in carrying the risk and the burden of their pension and their health benefits.
Mr. Loader, you want to rebut that quickly?
What most people don't realize is that the mayor of New York is not allowed by law to negotiate pensions with the unions. At the collective bargaining table, it is a violation of state law. The pensions are given to the union members by the state legislature and the governor, and there's a complete disconnect. Overall, they will put these, I cannot tell you how many times I've been to Albany looking to get rid of these pension sweeteners, and they get passed almost unanimously, both by the Senate and by the Assembly. And that's what most people need to know. The mayor, which you asked in your first question, might be all-powerful, but in the area of pensions, the mayor is not.
Time.
Thank you.
Okay. What one decision has each of you made, or what position have you taken in the past that you regret, that you would take back, that you would change? Preferably in government, not in your private life. We could talk about that another time.
I'll go first.
Sure,
It's
sure.
pretty simple and straightforward.
No tweets
It's
or
been
anything
well,
like that, right?
yeah, it's not about tweeting. It's not at all. The New York Times when the New York Times has nothing better to write about, they tend to rehash the article over and over again. When I was a deputy mayor and there was an art exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum, and no, but you got to hear the story. I had actually thought that it was wrong to use taxpayer money to desecrate someone's religion. I now know better. I now know how the court has ruled. Once you give money to an art institution or any institution that is unrestricted, that institution can do with it whatever they wish. But I still, in my heart of hearts, I hate that people's religions are desecrated, but it's the job of government. It is absolutely the job of government to protect one's First Amendment right to do whatever they want and freedom of expression. It would be my job as mayor to be able to allow both sides to be cordoned off and make them safe so that anybody wanted to go in to see. But the mistake I made at the time about the Brooklyn Museum was that I actually thought that using taxpayer funds to desecrate someone's religion was wrong.
Time.
Wait a minute. My understanding is that you have said you wouldn't do that today, but you don't regret that you did it. You're not saying you do
No,
it?
I regret my thinking was erroneous, that I thought that the, all wrapped up in the First Amendment with the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion, and how do you prioritize one over the other. Freedom of speech takes precedent in this area. Once a governmental entity gives money to anyone, the government cannot say what you can use it or not use it for. It's completely and totally unrestricted. As mayor, I will not put restrictions on any of the money that's given to our cultural institutions.
And you're sorry you did it? I'm still not clear, because I know I read in the Times that...
I'm sorry I was so forceful in what I did and how I went about doing it. But in my heart of hearts, do I regret doing it? Yeah, I regret doing it. I regret how embarrassing it was at the time, and it is to this day. But I also believe that we as New Yorkers, we as Americans, shouldn't use taxpayer dollars to desecrate someone's religion. We just shouldn't.
Okay, I'm still not clear. All right, Mr. Carrion, please.
I know, it's a fine line.
Mine is not so worldview gigantic. Mine is more of a technical nature, but I think I learned a very important lesson. And it had to do with the redevelopment of the Yankee Stadium neighborhood. We know that we ended up in a far better place with the Yankee Stadium development, new parks, new infrastructure, new roads, parking garages, et cetera, et cetera. One of the elements of that plan that I think was a failure, and if I could go back, I would be far more rigorous and demanding of the state legislature and the board that was constituted to create this parking garage facility that is now broke, that is often empty. That was one of those sort of technical errors or mechanical errors that maybe we misjudged the business deal.
Okay. Is character important in a mayor? Is character important in predicting the success of a mayor? We know a lot, I think a lot more than we want to, about Anthony Weiner's problems. We have learned that some of you have bad tempers or have shown poor judgment in the selection of staff members and advisors. Mr. Loda, you got hot under the collar once and said something for which you apologized, something about Mayor Bloomberg. We all have bad moments. We all have character flaws. Should the public care as much as we seem to about a mayor's temperament? Well, Mr. Carrion first. I'm sorry, then Mr. Loda.
I think the public should. I think that one should be concerned with character and judgment. The burden, opportunity, and responsibility of taking on leadership of a community, whether it is at a city council level, certainly at the executive level, in any place across our country, is a tremendous burden. And what should prevail is reason and not bullying. At the end of the day, this ought not be about anyone's ego. It really ought to be about what is best for society. And so I think that when people demonstrate that they cannot control their emotions in advancing their work, I think folks should be concerned about that.
Who are you talking about?
Well, not anybody in particular, but I can name a few.
Sounded as if you were.
Pardon?
It sounded as if you were talking about someone.
Well, there are some people, even in this race, that might have be a bit hot-headed, and what you don't want is, you want a champion. You want a champion of innovation and ideas and reason. Reason should always prevail.
You're talking about Christine Quinn?
Not necessarily, but I guess you could make that judgment on your own.
Okay. Mr. Loda? Mr. Loda? Temperament.
Joyce, temperament does matter. Character does matter. Every mayor of the city of New York in my lifetime, in your lifetime, has been a character of some sort or another. No question about it.
I like that.
And the reality is, you know, the mayor of the city of New York actually represents all of New York. And, you know, you can go from one neighborhood to another. They are radically different. The mayor needs to be as diversified as the city that he runs. Sure, I have said some inappropriate things. But you know what? I don't think it was incorrect in doing it, and I apologize for being from the Bronx where I was taught to speak my mind. And I will continue to do that. But that temperament is not, you know, when you don't suffer fools easily. You know, you don't want a mayor who is going to suffer fools easy. You want a mayor to speak the truth. You want the mayor to speak truth to power. And you want to be able to have someone who's going to have a vision who will lead the city. First and foremost, I called the mayor before the CEO. The mayor is going to be the leader of the city. And it's very, very important.
Time.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up. Of all the characters that I've covered, mayoral characters I've covered,
Here we go.
probably the one with the fiercest temper, was Rudy Giuliani, and yet there's a pretty broad consensus that he was an effective mayor. So where do you draw the line between judgment, character, and performance?
Can I ask you a question? Can you give me an example of his temper?
Example of what?
Of his temper?
Oh, I witnessed it. I saw it. I've seen it in Bloomberg. I've seen it in a lot of.
You've seen it in Bloomberg,
saw
too?
it in Koch. I mean,
Is it just the way they respond to reporters that they think you're all a pain in the neck? That could be.
it's one of them. So you don't really draw a line.
Sorry?
It's sort of, you know it when you see it, when someone is ineffective as mayor? Is that what you're saying?
No. What I'm saying is that you said that, you know, you talked and said that Rudy Giuliani lost his temper. I just wanted to know exactly when he lost his temper and how he did it.
I'll get back to you. I have notebooks for
Yeah, no,
it.
you can't come up with it. I know.
I'm going to turn the podium.
Joyce, let me just say, I think one of the things that happens and has happened in American political life is that we have confused bullying tactics and bullying tendencies with leadership. And I think we have to separate the two. We already are in a bullying society. Beware of the guy who yells too loud. He's trying to cover something up.
Actually, well, never mind. I'm not in the debate. We'll talk later. Sonia Osorio of New York City Now, New York City chapter of Now, is going to ask a few questions, and then I'll return to the podium. You're on. Thank you.
Okay, we don't have a whole lot of time, but I've got a number of burning questions for you. Pay equity, everybody in this room knows, still affects women on every rung of the career ladder. The Teamsters here have filed a federal class action lawsuit against the city, the largest class action suit in the country right now, because school safety guards, 70% of whom are women, earn $7,000 less annually than their largely male counterparts working in hospitals and shelters. The Bloomberg administration has actively fought this. If you're mayor, what will you do?
I will. There's no place in our society for pay inequity like that. But Sonia, did you say school crossing guards and then compare them to hospital workers?
School safety guards. It's all the same job category.
Right. All
They're
people in the
peace
same job
officers.
category should make the same amount of money. I don't understand why that is, and as mayor, I will make sure that there is equity.
Okay.
It is absolutely and entirely unacceptable. We are making the advances that are necessary to have a fair and just society. absent of discrimination of race, gender, sexual orientation, and all the other things that supposedly divide us. As mayor, I would ensure that is addressed on day one. I think it has to be in your inaugural speech that it will be a priority of your administration to achieve pay equity.
And with the Teamster and with the school
And
safety
we go
bill?
after the Teamsters and correct that, absolutely.
Okay, great. Okay. Some of the most high-profile, vicious rape cases in New York City during the past year were committed by cops. As mayor, what would you do to make sure the women in this city are safe in the hands of the very people who are supposed to be protecting us?
Police officers need to be held to a higher standard. They will be, in my administration, they will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, as well as they will begin from day one in the police academy training to make sure that they, so that we can also wean out any of the people who are at all predisposed for being as horrible in the situations that have happened here in the city of New York. Rape has gone up over the last 2 years in the city of New York, 6%. We need to make sure that the cops are there to protect the women and not having the women be afraid of our police officers.
The sacred trust of public service applies to everyone that is engaged in it, but most especially to officers of the law that are supposed to apply it equally and fairly and without discrimination of any kind. I think that that is a terrible scar on our society. We need to throw the law book at these officers that violate that trust. But we also need a new and much more aggressive training program that deals with the sensitivities associated with policing. The criminal cop needs to be treated like a criminal.
Absolutely.
JFK has been deemed a major entry point for human trafficking here in New York. How do you plan to improve on Bloomberg administration's efforts to combat modern-day slavery here in New York City? As you know, next year is going to be, we're going to have the Super Bowl. And trafficking increases in major sporting events.
First off, when it comes to what's going to happen during the Super Bowl and literally the prostitution that seems to be endemic anytime there are these large sporting events, it's important that all of the law enforcement officers within the city of New York, whether it's the Port Authority, which has control over JFK, the NYPD, cops in New Jersey, where the game's actually going to be played, need to coordinate this. And it should be done in conjunction with the federal government, because security at the Super Bowl is actually coordinated by the Department of Homeland Security. I have been concerned about security at JFK Airport ever since the first day I stepped into government in 1994. I don't think the Port Authority does a good enough job in anything that they do, quite honestly, but clearly in the area of security, that is not what they should do. Those cops get paid more than NYPD cops, and quite honestly, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, they're nothing more than mall cops. And what they need to be able to do is to function in a way that they are there to protect the people of New York and protect the commercial traffic that goes through those airports.
I think we all understand and embrace that human trafficking and prostitution and those kinds of activities that diminish any human being are insidious and are a terrible thing in our society, and we need to fight against it. That horrible, horrible thing that we discovered in Cleveland, and thank God those girls got out, and the young woman got out this morning. They escaped. That's happening. It's happening in many places. We need a task force that is focused on the Super Bowl. We already know where the trafficking is going to come from. We already know the tendencies in certain places around the world. So we need the TSA, the NYPD, the FBI, the Port Authority Police to create a working group that starts to plan in advance And just like we have an anti-terrorism a task force with 1,000 officers,
Time.
We need to do a similar model.
Will you take a stronger stand on the men who create the demand?
Sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Johns need to be prosecuted. Anybody who attempts to utilize the service of however you want to describe it, of a prosecutor, should be actually prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I have no problem with publishing the list of names of people who are arrested because they were Johns, because they're soliciting a prostitute. You need to do everything within your power to make sure that women are safe. And I have no problem with doing a John list every day in the newspapers.
Thank you.
When I served as borough president, I worked with the NYPD on a program. We had to address this issue and to go after the Johns, because if there is no demand, there won't be a supply. Right. And so we attacked two very important corridors. One was Jerome Avenue in the Bronx that had these so-called hot sheet motels, and another was street prostitution out in Hunts Point that became the subject of an HBO documentary. And it was a very, very sad movie, because you see these tragic lives just falling apart, dependent on drugs, on pimps, and just dysfunctional relationships. And the creeps, in my estimation, that go around prowling in those areas looking for, in my estimation, victims. So we need to throw the book of the law at them. I agree with Joe in that case that, you know, we ought to publish their names and their license plates in the newspaper.
Okay, one last question. I know I'm running behind. What is the one thing you would do to bring equality to the women of New York City when you become mayor?
Me? You?
The one thing, I think that there is a great power in the symbolism of having women in leadership positions. As a man of color and somebody who has been sort of on the other side of hate and racism and classism and all the ugly side of who we can be and are fighting not to be, I think that when we have a leader that understands the important power of the symbolism of their role in society, and embraces that, I think that's important. So I would look across the leadership at the highest levels of the city agencies and ensure that there are, at the very least, an equal number of women and men representing the city of New York in leadership positions.
Time.
Thank you so much.
Sonia, I agree. Appointing women to leadership positions will be the one thing that I'll be noted for. And in preparing for this discussion tonight, I went through and I decided to look at all the people who I've appointed in the past. More than 50% of my staff when I was a deputy mayor in City Hall were women. The most important position I appointed when I was at the MTA was a woman. And I went for the best possible person. And when you do that, more than 50% of the time, it's going to be a woman. So I actually believe, just as Adolfo does, you lead by example. In the past, if the past is prologue, there will be women deputy mayors. I can't tell you how many, but I will make sure that there is more than a fair complement, more than a 50% complement of women in my administration.
Thank you so much. We have a quick, what do you call it, Joe?
Rapid
Lightning
fire,
round for you.
lightning round.
There is no debate without a lightning round, right? So we're going to have a lightning round.
Uh-oh.
Should we abandon term limits? These are yes or no's.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that
Should we
question.
abandon term limits?
Absolutely not.
No.
All right. Will you retain mayoral control of the public schools? Mr. Carrion?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Since both of you support equality of every kind, should more women be stopped and frisked?
There should be equal application.
Yes, so the answer is yes. Mr. Voloda?
The answer is, and there's no yes or no answer to this, because stop and frisk is a function of how victims of crime describe their assailants. And if the assailant happens to be a woman, then women get questioned and frisked.
Critics of stop and frisk, those say that there's a lot of subjectivity involved.
When a victim of a crime says that the person who assailed them is a man, there should be no reason in the world why a woman is stopped,
Okay.
questioned, and frisked.
That's good. I like that.
Should the school's chancellor be an educator, or would you name someone who needs a state waiver? Mr. Loda?
No state waiver, it's someone who has an education background.
Mr. Carrion?
Absolutely an educator.
All right. Should there be an age minimum for the over-the-counter sale of morning after pills? Mr. Carrion?
Repeat the
Should there
question.
be an age minimum, a minimum age for a woman to buy the morning after pill over the counter?
I think there should be a reasonable minimum.
Mr. Loda?
I believe there should be a reasonable minimum. If you're talking about Plan B, we know what it is now, but it's RU 487. It should be a whole different issue.
Okay. Here's an easy one. Would you, as mayor, keep the bike lanes?
Keep the bike lanes. I'm a biker.
Yes. They may move a little bit, but I'm going to keep them.
Out of your neighborhood, right? Do you
Not in my
consider,
neighborhood.
does each of you consider himself a feminist?
Yes.
Never thought about it.
Well,
Though when I
Here's
go
your
home
chance,
tonight,
sir.
I'm sure my wife and daughter will remind me about that.
that's it. I want to thank you both for coming. You've been
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.